The age-old question, why didn't the Fellowship just fly the eagles into Mordor? Because by Boromir's words, one does not just walk into Mordor, so why not fly into Mordor, right? And in my opinion, they could have. Yep, I am taking a stance that they could have taken the eagles into Mordor, and today I will explore how that would probably play out. Because in my opinion, the only way the ring would have gotten actually destroyed was through the chain of the events that actually happened, that actually took place. And that flying there, yes, they could have, but they would have eventually failed. And I will explain why. So, let's say that Gandalf, goes to the Shire and, he urges Bilbo to leave. And then they leave and they kind of arrange in Rivendell, right? And in the Council of Elrond, they decide that the best course of action is to call upon the Eagles. Now, the Eagles, one of the biggest arguments against, why they couldn't have taken the Eagles is that the Eagles are not a taxi service. And I have a huge problem with this point. Primarily because the Eagles are a part of that world, and being a part of that world, they may not be a taxi service, but preventing the doom of Middle Earth is not necessarily the type of thing that they couldn't do. When, the fate of the world is at hand, maybe the Eagles could have, spared their ego for a bit, and, yeah, they're not a taxi service, but how about this one time you carry the burden of the ring and actually destroy it instead of letting the world burn? I think the Eagles refusing to fly, Frodo and everyone else, or at least Frodo, into Mordor would have been a very egotistical and arrogant move. Because how arrogant do you have to refuse to save the world, right? I mean, if this is the best chance the free peoples of Middle Earth have at destroying the ring, then quite frankly, why not just do that, right? And for the argument of they can't fly that far, as I believe the eagle once said to Gandalf, I believe, that the answer to that is, well, just take breaks, right? You can fly and you can rest and then you can fly again. Now, the biggest flaw in this plan in flying into Mordor is that, quite frankly, Mordor is a fortress, and the only reason that Sam and Frodo were able to get to Mount Doom and destroy the ring in the first place, and in the actual story, is because Aragorn had massed up an army and went to the Black Gate, and he had fooled Sauron, and Sauron thought, in my opinion, that Aragorn had the ring, right? Sauron thought that, oh, well, if Aragorn is, this mighty, he probably has the ring, so he probably thinks he can beat me. So basically, Aragorn distracted him. If they had taken the shortcut of the Eagles, well, then that wouldn't just simply be the case. Lord Denethor would probably be steward, still alive and kicking, still haven't burned his son alive while they were flying. So that's one thing, is that the chain of events that actually took place allowed for the perfect circumstances for the ring to be destroyed, and the Frodo and Sam being such small creatures, so insignificant, they could, that's how they went under radar. They were very stealthy, flying the eagles into Mordor. First of all, everyone would see, right? In Nazgul, everybody would see a big ass bird, because if I remember also correctly, the one of the eagles is like half a football stadium in size, right? And like total wingspan. So that thing was massive. If that thing, flew into Mordor, they would have been immediately noticed. And once they would have, immediately been noticed, then the, everything, orcs, Nazgul, goblins, everything, archers would mass up. They would run to the one, Mount Doom, and they would protect it. And, as it said in the books, they can't, the entrance to Mount Doom, it's not like immediately noticeable. In the films, it looks like very big, right? It looks very like, oh, you could see that from like a mile away. But like you couldn't, like if you fly up to, Mount Doom, they couldn't land there. They would have had to land like lower, right? They would have had to land in a more accessible spot. and there would be plenty of works there. So the biggest problem wouldn't be actually getting there. The biggest problem would be that they would have been noticed, they would have been spotted and immediately destroyed, as you can see in the Return of the King. Whenever the eye sees Frodo, and whenever everything starts happening, the Nazgul immediately turn around and start flying. Imagine having to fight the Nazgul on like a couple of eagles. You would be done for, right? Everything that's just not going to work out for you. So that's the main problem. I think they could have definitely used the eagles to maybe fly to Gondor, maybe fly past some of the passes. Maybe Gandalf wouldn't have had to die if they took the eagles. But at that point, the eagles would have been just a taxi service, right? Because you're not using them to really save the world, you're just using them to aid your journey. It's like if you're trying to get from one point to another, you call a taxi, and you just use the taxi to go there, right? So that's kind of one of the like issues with kind of aiding their journey. They had to do this on their own. So that's kind of one of the reasons, as I see, that this couldn't have been the case. So yes, in my opinion, they could have taken the eagles to Mordor, but that would have resulted in the ring not being destroyed. If it would have been an attempt, sure, but I think, in my opinion, the only way for the ring to actually be destroyed is the way it happened in the books. The chain of events that occurred in the books, in the movies, was just so intricate, so real, that is the only way that could have happened. Through the relationships, through the events, this happened. For example, Denethor killed himself, and Aragorn became the leader of Gondor. He became, of course, originally in the books, I remember Aragorn was reluctant to take the king's throne. He slept outside in a tent, as I remember in the books it was said. So that's really, but he led the army. And if Denethor would have been still alive, he would have never led an army to the Black Gate. He would have never done that, for example, right? Or through the for example, relationship with Frodo and Gollum, they somehow managed to get through the through the pass, right? The Kiratungal pass, right? So basically, or like the relationships between Gimli and Legolas, basically the path that Tolkien wrote, the journey they took, was not only good from a literary perspective, because obviously it would have been boring. Oh, we just took the eagles and we destroyed the ring. That's kind of boring, right? Nobody cares about that. But that would have been boring. So from a literary standpoint, Tolkien did a good thing, but he also did a logical thing. And they did use animals like horses and ponies, so it's not like they were on foot for the sake of being on foot. No, we can see in the movies too, like Gandalf riding Shadowfax. Horses in that world were specifically a taxi service. The eagles were more of a slightly higher form of being, right? And they helped only in very crucial moments when they were actually like needed, right? We see in The Hobbit them helping, although I think that was a little bit, a little, a little over dramatized. I will say that. But yeah, so they could have taken the Eagles. For my final answer to this question, they could have taken the Eagles, but it would have been a fruitless attempt. They would have failed. The task would have been failed. So many relationships wouldn't have been forged. Nothing would have happened. I think that they should have discussed this option. I think Tolkien should have written this in the book. I think there should have been a full-on conversation between somebody like Gandalf and Lord Elrond about this, so that they can directly discuss it, and this question would have been answered. but they did not, so we have to make it up ourselves. So yeah, so that's the video. Hope you enjoyed. This is my second video on this channel, so if you can, please hit that subscribe button, because I will be making more content regarding culture. The channel's named Culture, so I think I'm gonna do more cultural videos. I want to do some with Star Trek, maybe a bit of Star Wars, movies that I find very interesting. I like a lot of 90s movies, The Matrix. Woohoo! There's going to be some fire videos. So hang in there. There's going to be plenty of videos about beautiful pieces of media that exist in our world. If you liked it, obviously like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it and leave in the comments why you disliked it so I can improve in the future. Hope you enjoyed. Live long and prosper.